Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's panel discussion. My name is Dean Davey, and I'll be your host for this session. Today's topic is specific to organizational behavior, more specific to the topic of teamwork. I have an expert panel with me today. I have Commodore Jake Moores and Roger McCartney. Gentlemen, welcome to today's panel discussion.
Thank you.
There's been a lot said and done about teamwork, and one of the best definitions I've ever heard of teamwork is a group of people working together for a common goal. How do you get a group of individuals to work together for a common goal? There's individual competition, there's organizational values, there's organizational desire and strategy and vision. And what we're saying is that we need to get a team of individuals striving towards something that's best for the common good, the team. Jake, I'd like to start this by asking you a question of what is your experience of the key characteristics of a high-performing team?
I think the first thing is that you've got to get the team together. They've all got to buy in to what you're trying to achieve. If they're not all buying in to that value and to that end state that they're trying to get to, then you're going to have real difficulties. I think the next thing that you need is you need a leader. You need somebody who's going to set the goals, set the requirements, and take people forward. But more importantly, you've got to get people working together. You've got to get them understanding each other and the different dynamics. And you've got to form that team to start with. And that's often done face-to-face. And I think it's most effectively done face-to-face, where they can actually interact with each other. The verbal and non-verbal communication piece comes in very importantly at that stage.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is a common goal. You've got a leader, and you've got to get them working together. Roger, would you agree with that?
Absolutely agree with that. Clarity of focus, sense of purpose, and a collective sense of purpose. Understanding the whole task that they all need to be involved with. We need a leader in a team who can make sure that the various parts of the jigsaw are being effectively dealt with. But we need also the contribution, and the best contribution, from all the members of that team. So whatever knowledge, skills, experience that they have got, we really need to capitalise on that and bring the value of that into the solution of the problem.
Okay, so I'm also hearing individual contribution, a value from the leader for individual sort of contribution.
Indeed.
And positioning that individual's contribution in the team, in the right space.
Very much so.
Fantastic. Okay, well that brings us to today's case study, Learning Lab. We've got a young leader. He's reached a stage in a project that it seems as if it's falling to pieces. I'd like to go back, I guess, to go forward in terms of this case study. Jake, if I could ask you, what do you think that the leader at this stage, Matt, has done well to get to the point where he's at?
Well, I think he did the right thing to start with by bringing the team together physically into one location and giving them an opportunity to get to know each other and work together. I think he then set out the objectives and understood what they were and let people then go into the virtual environment in order to work and contribute. I think then that's when things started to break down, and we'll come on to that, I'm sure.
Roger, what are your views? What's he done correctly? And then maybe you can expand on that and build on what you think he might have done differently.
I think clearly he needed to understand what this project was about. He needed to ensure that others understood that. We had this training programme which was hopefully designed to achieve unity of purpose and everybody understanding what their part in that jigsaw was. But the reality has proved to be quite different, and whatever communication took place, whatever understanding went from that training process, it's clearly fallen apart now, and people are either competing for roles, they're frustrated that the right sort of leadership's not being given, we're not sure how it's coming together. And we're really at the point where we've got to say stop and bring it back and to re-establish where we're coming from and where we want that team to take this job.
Okay, so stop, bring it back, sounds like where we're at. Jake, what would you do?
I think my impression from reading the case study is that the team never really formed. We all know forming, storming, norming, and then performing. I don't think they got the forming part right. I don't think 2 days was long enough for them to get to know each other and work out each other's characteristics. And I suspect there was a lot of sitting down and being told information and practicing things rather than actually getting to know each other. And I think that's very important. So I think that he needs to really go back into the forming part. But also, I think he's not really understood the leadership style that he needs. And I think he, in the storming part, will need to be more authoritative than he has been. But he also needs to think about delegation and how that's going to work out in the way he's operating. He needs to set the boundaries for the team. He needs to tell each person what their roles are and think about the roles and responsibilities that he's assigning to each person. I think he needs to make sure that they've got the resources and capability to do what they need to do. He needs to think about setting parameters for reporting back to him. So if things are going well, he won't get much reporting back, but he needs to tell them when they need to come back to him for further guidance or decisions, and I don't think he's done any of that.
I'm hearing possibly understanding the stage of development of the team. So you mentioned the norming and the storming and the forming, and then you said making sure that we understand the roles of each individual contribution in the context of that team. Now, I always thought that the norming, storming, forming, and role allocation, all these models around it, was really a bunch of theoretical stuff. Does that actually apply in practice?
You might not do it with a conscious and an overt framework to do that, but you clearly do need to go through a process. This is about creating collective understanding. Again, it's back to whose role, who is going to be responsible for delivering different parts of this role. When do we need to be talking to each other to get some joined-up thinking and development of the solution? This is really the essence of what real teamwork is about. It's understanding when we've got scope to get on with the job, when is it we need to pause, take a second opinion, involve somebody else with the right expertise. But in terms of our performance as a team, we're really trying to give the customer the best solution that we can come up with, and we need to engage everyone in that process.
Fantastic.
I would also advocate that you don't just go through those 4 stages of forming, storming, norming and performing. You might need to go back as well. Teams have different dynamics, and as situations change, you might need to actually think, well, actually we need to do something slightly different here, come back a stage or leap a stage if that's where you're getting to. So it's not just one continuum all the time, and there may be loop backs, there may be leap forwards, depending on the situation as it develops.
If you were to look at what Matt's done in the situation in terms of the 2 key concepts we're discussing now, we're saying understanding the development stages of the team, we're saying understanding the individual roles and unique contributions. What would you have done differently?
I think I would have had a longer forming stage. I think I'd have had the group together for 3 or 4 days, so you could have spread out some of that training and given people opportunity to interact and get together socially as well as in the workplace, because that forms relationships, and those relationships are very important when you're working apart. Having the confidence to be able to call somebody on the telephone and talk to them, that is much easier if you know and understand somebody and actually have met them socially as well as in the work environment. So I would have elongated that forming stage. And then I think Matt needed to be much more directive in the way he took the team from that forming stage into the storming, the next stage, where they went out and worked. I think he became a bit too hands-off and he needed a much more direct leadership style.
That does raise an interesting point, actually, Jack, is that Matt possibly in this situation was not directive enough, Roger. What's your views on that?
I'd agree with that.
And I think a second part of the question is, how does he bring this back? Because one would think that at this stage of the project, you're having absconded. There's quite a complex situation to now grab it back, isn't there?
Matt's in a very difficult situation in the sense that we've got people who want to take this in different direction, they're doing their own thing, and he's really got to establish his authority again. And in my reading between the lines, I think he's in a position where he can't do that without taking authority, and it perhaps invites Steve Fish to come back and re-establish his authority within that team. Steve Fish to define what his expectation is of that team, what Matt's role is in relation to leading that team and then reinforcing the contribution that others will then be able to make. But without that, it's really difficult to see how Matt can re-establish that, because he's going to get whether they're rivalries, whether they're frustrations within people. People need to believe this guy can lead and will lead. And once given that authority, he's back in the driving seat, and it's up to him to demonstrate leadership, but also to create and develop the team.
You said earlier that he needs to obtain responsibility. I would have thought that when he was elected project leader, he automatically had that. What's the complication here?
Yeah, I sense in the way the case study's rolled out that he's actually lost that control. He's almost abdicated. And other people are seeing the need. Somebody's got to get this together, and they're coming in. So Matt has really got a key job, which is re-establishing his position and his leadership role in solving this problem or producing this product.
Yeah. So a number of possible solutions here to this case study, isn't there? Where what I'm hearing is re-establish the responsibility and accountability for it. Jake, I'm hearing from you, go off-site and go through that storming stage again, allocate individual contribution, responsibilities, roles, etc., and take control of the projects, what I'm hearing from both of you. That be a fair summary of where we're at right now? What are the other options?
Well, the other options is just to do nothing and let the team carry on, and that will cause difficulties. And I think he would lose the team, and I think he wouldn't complete the project. And I think that there's a real danger of that in this stage at the moment.
Okay, so option number 2, just let it be, let it be, let it be. Option number 3, he's got this sort of second in charge, Darren, who's clearly sort of quite a senior in the organisation. What would you do with Darren in this situation, Roger? If I was Matt, I would look to say, well, if I can't lead every minute of every day, perhaps Darren's the gentleman who we can put into position to deputise, to be a second port of call if anybody's looking for guidance and ideas on how we move on to the next stage. So it's really about reinforcing Matt's position, but also providing a fallback as and when we need it. Fantastic. So we've got A, B or C. Jake, where are you at?
I would go with solution B, but slightly modified from the solution that's set out in the information we've been given. Solution B, in fundamental terms, is about right. But what I would do if I was Matt was go back to the forming stage, get everybody together in one location, engage them socially, give them a bit more training. But the first thing I would do would be to get Steve in to say a few words, and I would write them if I was Matt. And that would be about 2 things. One is how important this project is to the company, and the second one is reaffirming Matt as the leader, giving him that authority from the CEO in front of the rest of the team so that they all understand where he's coming from. And during that phase, Matt then needs to set out the delegational piece. He needs to set out what he wants each individual to do. He needs to give them their roles and responsibilities in fairly stringent terms. He needs to set out how he wants them to report back. What are the lines that they can do, what authority they have, and where they can't go, and where they must come to him for further guidance. And I think if he can do that, and then become a bit more authoritative in the way he manages it, and perhaps, as Roger's suggested, appointing Darren as his sort of second-in-command, as his executive officer in naval parlance, to control things for him when he can't do it all himself, that, I think, may allow him to then take things forward effectively. Fantastic. Roger, your closing words? I fully agree. Solution B is the best solution here, and it is really now in Matt's hands. I think we do have to go back. We do have to re-establish a foundation on which to build, and as we've said, if we can get that authority back and Matt reinforced in the position of leader, then it then becomes his responsibility, and everything that follows thereafter is then up to him. But it is clearly about everyone in that team understanding who is leading overall, who's utilising their own specialisms to make a successful outcome. So option B with a few modifications, what I'm hearing. Yes, I think that's fair. Yeah. Fantastic, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you in the panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, that ends this panel discussion on teamwork. Thank you very much for joining us.